Welcome. I'm Jennifer Firestein, Associate State Director for AARP Michigan. We're glad you're joining us today for AARP's Virtual Learn a Latte. Over the next half hour, we'll share valuable information about the health benefits pets can provide people. Even before COVID-19, isolation was a topic that AARP focused on and the negative health effects in older adults. We're doing what we can to ensure people have the connectedness that's necessary to thrive and stay healthy, especially during this pandemic. And companion animals is one way that older adults can feel connected. So throughout today's presentation on companion animals, if you have questions, please ask them in the comment section and we will answer them throughout today's presentation. We also want to engage with you to share your pet stories and how pets add to your life. So again, use the comment section. We want to hear from you. This is being recorded and you'll be able to access it here on the AARP Michigan Facebook page. That way you can watch it again or share it with others. So joining me today is Namiko Oda-Neveski. Namiko has been working with dogs and cats for over 15 years. For each behavior case, she combines her education and her experience while maintaining respect for the individual differences of each animal. Namiko has a master's degree in applied psychology and also completed additional graduate coursework in behavior analysis. She'll talk today about the science of whether people really are happier with pets or without. Namiko, let's get things kicked off. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me. This is a really exciting topic, so I'm really excited to spend some time talking about people and animals. And much of what I'm talking about today comes from actually a study the field around through zoology, and Dr. Herzog is among the researchers, and I'll be sharing a lot of the stuff that they kind of share. If anyone's interested, Animals and Us, it's articles that you can find in Psychology Today, and there are lots of interesting things that they post out there. So let's get started though about why we have animals. You know, what do we do with them? And you see in the next slide, lots of functions that animals do. So they're simply companions, family members. Many of us in this country, we think of them as family members. So they're just more than pets. And a lot of us want to do some training. They do competition, agility, sports. Some of us do hunting. And of course, we can't forget they do a lot of work for us too, police, search and rescue, detection, and they also do wildlife rescue. And in the medical field too, they can sniff out cancer. They can do, I think they're even doing some research with coronavirus to see if dogs can sniff out coronavirus. And of course, service dogs, assistance dogs, and emotional support dogs are the ones that are, I think, really catching on. A lot of people have pets as emotional support. And you'd see that as we discuss more about the emotional support dogs. And as we talk about the benefits, you would see that in newspaper articles and, lots of news headlines that promote the health of humans by having companion animals. And a lot of them will claim improved health, mental well-being, people are less likely to be depressed, and we're physically fit, and it's just good for child's development. And they tend to have more helping behaviors by having a pet, and they learn to care for pets. And also people with Alzheimer's, autism spectrum disorder, there are lots of dogs that are functioning as service animals in that aspect. And many family doctors recommend, having a pet as emotional support and health benefits. So what we're going to look at next is that really true? What does science say? So when you look at recent research, it's really not what we expect to find. So you can see in this graph done by Dr. Herzog here, pet owners are in red and non-pet owners are in green. And when you look at the quality of life, what they've answered in the survey, it's really not that different. And you can really see, so participants are older people. 37% of them had dogs, 62% had cats. And their answers are really not different at all. And when they looked at the body mass index, pet owners are actually slightly heavier than the non-pet owners. So where are these health benefits? And on the next slide, we'll see, so what's the good news? Well, the good news is people were more physically active when they owned a pet. But then when you looked at the details closer, you could see that there's just not a significant health effects in both of those groups. And then another good thing that they reported was they had less difficulties falling asleep. But then when you looked at a little bit more in detail, those people also reported that they felt a little bit more tired when they woke up. And of course, one aspect of this is they had a positive perception of a neighborhood. So they're maybe talking to their neighbors more while they're walking dogs, things like that. But when they looked at overall impact on their health or emotional benefit, they just did not really see a lot of differences. And I forgot to mention too, I took a liberty of inserting some of our adopted dogs in this slide. So you'll see Jasper here, adopted. I just kind of wanted to showcase that as well. On the next slide too, you'll see another picture of our adopted dog, Jane, Great Dane. Some of these dogs come to us in a really rough shape too. So we care for them and then get them ready for adoption.
So Namiko, I have a question. So
Sure.
you talked about that people that have pets have a slightly higher BMI, so they're slightly heavier, but yet they're more physically active. So can you talk to that as far as how they're more physically active, yet they're still heavier and have a higher BMI?
I think that could be the choice of their diet choice too, but also I think we could indulge ourselves more when we're active. So, well, I'm active, so I might be able to just, so there might be that too. But also active meaning they may have engaged in walking, but that's not necessarily a rigorous exercise. So I think there's a lot more to look into if they're looking at the physical health. And one of the things I noticed was a lot of those comments people made were actually more psychological health than physical health. Many people reported that, they felt less lonely or they felt happier, but not so much, I physically feel healthier. So I think the benefits are more actually psychological, emotional than physical benefits. And that could also apply to if you're talking about cats. So there's a lot of emphasis on dogs, but a lot of people have cats. So that might be a difference too.
Okay.
All right. So what are the benefits? So they looked at children and they had more pro-social behaviors, so more helping behaviors. And I think there's something to look forward to in terms of maybe we want to see long-term studies rather than, looking at short-term effects. But also, once again, we're seeing conflicting information, even with children with pets. And also, what researchers found is when they factor in other things, so their socioeconomic status to, parental health, home ownership, race, when they took those things into consideration, then all of these differences simply just disappeared. So which is it? Is it helping kids, or is it the wealth, the parental health or parental guidance that's actually helping more? So once again, it's kind of still up in the air as far as what pets are actually doing on our health and as also psychological health. So on the next slide, we'll talk about what about can we actually get hurt by pets? There was an interesting article out recently about how people are actually getting hurt accidentally by having a pet. A lot of them trip over pets. It's very easy to trip over small dogs, cats, because cats rub up against you and they can be between your legs. And also, some dogs pull a lot. And I've known someone who got pulled over by a dog when she was walking and broke her nose. And dogs can crush into you. This happened to me too when I was working. 40-pound dog ran straight into me and actually broke my knee. So injuries can happen. Some of them fall and hit their head. And there are lots of reports of people actually getting hurt, having surgeries, long-term recoveries. And of course, the older we get, more likely this would happen. So there's certainly something to consider when you're thinking about having a pet. Like, they could actually hurt you, not intentionally, but certainly this could happen. So when we look at the benefits of having pets, we also have to look at what could be some of the consequences. So what this all means is that it's not so much that the science says, there's not a whole lot of benefit of having pets, but you could actually get hurt by pets. What the researchers are really looking at is that they may not be measuring the right thing at this point. And there's a big difference between asking people questions about their psychological being when they already have a pet versus doing actual experiment to see how they develop certain bond with their pet when they don't have anything to when they have a pet. So there was a research done in South Korea, actually. They randomly picked people and they gave them crickets as a pet. Crickets actually is a well thought of insect in certain parts of Asia. So people received instructions and they got a cricket, and there was a control group, so those who didn't receive a cricket, but they were asked to do certain exercise and whatnot. And they actually found that those who received cricket and cared for it had improved health, overall psychological being. So when you actually do an experiment like that, it appears that there are certain positive impacts, even an insect can bring on, because you develop this bond by caring for them, taking care of them. So there's definitely a positive impact, because if you had a pet, I think we could all relate. Why do we even need science to tell us that there's a positive impact? But I think what's interesting and important is that we have this bond that we develop with animals, and there's something that's just not replaceable about it. And that's what I think difficulty science is finding how to measure it. But one thing that they do caution you, and I have this on the next slide, is that if you want a pet because you want the health benefits, that probably should not be the reason for wanting and having a pet. That's something I think that comes later, but that should not be the primary reason for having a pet. Is that because you want the health benefits, or I want to live longer, or I don't want to be depressed, therefore I should have a pet, might not be the best reason for it.
So Namiko, I'm fascinated by the cricket study, that just taking care of crickets improved a person's health and psychological well-being. That's actually fascinating. So my question to you is, the higher up that an animal or a creature gets on the intelligence spectrum, does that increase person's well-being? So obviously taking care of a dog has far more reward to it than taking care of a cricket. So does that increase then for a person's well-being?
I think that ultimately is for research to find out, but I think it's also the perception, so that study was done in South Korea, and people in South Korea, like in China and Japan as well, crickets are like one of those insects that they like. That might not be true in other countries. So, but I think the person's perception of that particular pet, I think, is important. So if you don't like a spider and you had a spider as a pet, I don't see that would be a positive impact. So I think how the person views that pet must be a significant part of it. But
I don't know too many people that would take a spider on for a pet. but obviously lots of people have dogs and cats.
Yeah, and some people like reptiles. So, they have a snake as a pet and they have this relationship with their pet. But when you talk about animals like dogs and cats, where they seem to develop specific communication skills geared toward people, so they don't communicate in a certain way with their own species, but they do it differently with people. That study has been established with both cats and dogs. Okay. So when you have animals like that, I think it's obvious that we do develop more, deeper relationship with those animals that may be difficult to do with other species.
Because dogs and cats obviously are more interactive. You can develop a relationship with them just by playing fetch.
Sure.
That you just don't have with a spider or a cricket.
Yeah, and dogs too, they tend to look at the part of your face that express emotions more. So they're so in tuned with your emotions and, feelings. And I think that's one of the reasons why people have dogs and, we feel a certain way about having them and just keeping them as companion.
All right, thank you for that.
Okay, so once we know what kind of animals you like, how to find the right pet, or should you have a pet? If you are a creature of habits, you have to expect that having a dog might, change that routine. And if you've never had a dog, you might want to think about what will be an easy start. And if you have limited mobilities or, it's difficult for you to walk a dog, then you have to think about, okay, is dog an option or is cat a better option? And therapy dog or emotional support animals, if you have a tendency to really feel lonely, maybe it's good to talk to your doctor about having emotional support animal. And depending on where you live, some people visit, like a therapy dog, they go and visit, children in hospitals and different places. And just before this pandemic, universities are utilizing a lot of therapy dog or sometimes canine good citizen dogs that are trained and have good manners to go to, university campus and visit students before or during final seasons, because students are pretty stressed out over the exams and stuff. And age of pet, different age requires different training or healthcare for them, and personality of pet. And people who have PTSD tend to train their dogs so that they don't receive the brunt of the social interaction. So the dog actually helps in that regard. And how about the health and behavior pet? having a dog with a certain behavior issues can really have negative impact on the person as well as others. So that's something to think about. And should you have one or two? So we're going to look at this a little bit in more detail in the next slide and coming up. And let's not forget, cats and dogs aren't the only. We talked about insects, but fish, small mammals, guinea pigs are great starters because they're easy to handle and they're pretty personable. And a lot of people like rabbits. Some people do birds. Birds are highly intelligent and they live for a long time. So that's definitely something to think about. And exotics. And exotics like hedgehogs. Some people like hedgehogs. But you have to think about the cost of getting one as well as they are considered exotic for a reason. So you might have to find a veterinarian that can actually provide, veterinary care for those animals.
I would like to offer that the viewers that are watching this to include in the comment section what kind of pet you have or pet you're considering. I think it would be interesting to see where people fall as far as the types of pets that they have. So if you have something or a pet, or you're considering getting a pet, put that in the comment section. We can speak to that.
All right, let's go to the next slide. And I'm going to focus more of a talk towards fluffy animals than scaly ones, probably. They need exercise. If you have a dog, they need walking. But if you have a limited capacity for that, there are people who walk a dog for you. They run their business, or doggy daycare, or a fenced-in yard might be necessary for some dogs. And if you have a cat, you have a job of cleaning litter, so routine feeding for any type of animal you have, and certainly training and enrichment is necessary. And enrichment in terms of not just the physical enrichment, but psychological enrichment. Animals need that too. They need to think about stuff and learn things. And enrichment can be in the form of, like a food puzzle, how to get this food out of this little container. Those can be an enrichment as well. And on the next slide, just a briefly difference about therapy dog, emotional support dog, and service dog. That can be a presentation in of itself, but therapy dogs can go to hospitals, nursing homes, universities, and they provide comfort to many people. Emotional support dog, they don't have to do any functions or perform tasks. As you can see, Joan here as emotional support here right now to the person resting her head, being cute. And they serve a specific person, the owner. But when you talk about service dogs or assistance dogs, they are specifically trained to help a specific person, and they are the ones that are allowed to go to restaurant, public places, because they have to accompany the person that they're helping. And that's a lot of training. So it might be a little bit different depending on what your needs are. But for the most of us, it's companion animals. So when you're looking for companion animals, you might want to look at, in the next slide will show, age and personality. So Athena here is a very active dog. So what are we looking for? She's pretty young too. So the young dogs, not mature, they're juvenile, like teenager, different from mature dogs or senior dogs in terms of personality or, what they need in terms of veterinary care. And when you get a puppy or kitten, maybe kitten not so much, but puppy, definitely, you don't really know how big they're going to get sometimes. So that's something to think about. And a lot of people gear towards younger dogs, but I really want to take a moment to sell senior animals. They are pretty laid back many times, and the size they're going to be, and they're pretty polite, and they make great pets. They often get overlooked, but they're great pets. And you might also want to think about, do you want an extroverted personality or introverted personality dogs or cats? Do you want the dog to greet everybody, or do you really want them to cuddle up to you and be really focused on you? Because extroverted dogs are most likely to greet everyone and anyone. So that's something to think about too. On the next slide, so health and behavior. And this is something to think about when you're looking for, especially if you're thinking about adopting, rescuing an animal, which is a noble thing to do. Think about the financial burden. If the dog or cat has pre-existing medical conditions, some of them are pretty cheap to, maintain or manage. Other ones, not so much. And also, some dogs have mild to moderate behavior issues. How difficult or easy is it for you to accommodate that? And really, when you have a dog that's extremely shy of other people, that may limit how you might have guests over in your home. So that's something to think about. And certainly, you want this to be a positive impact in your life. And you don't really want to isolate yourself because your dog can't handle people. Then, that's something to think about so that it can benefit not just you, but the dog or the cat that you have. And just a couple other things on the next slide. Should you have one or two? I've seen some people do this. They get siblings together, puppies together, and they bond with each other a lot more than they bond with people, and that can create problems. But instead, cats, brothers, sisters, mom and daughter team, they actually do pretty well together. So that might actually be a good thing to do to transition them less stressfully into your home by having them together. But when you have more animals, it doesn't always take away your responsibility. So you have to, supervise more. That'll increase in training. Of course, the cost will be more. So that's something to think about. And some rabbits and some animals, they bond really together. So, it would be more stressful if they had to be separated. And again, this may be more if you are adopting. And the cost. It's a lot to take care of animals. And some may be, of course, less expensive than others, but cats and dogs, they need vaccines, they need veterinary visits, they may need monthly medications, flea prevention, stuff like that. And they need toys, bedding. And if you rent, they might need extra deposit. And if you get puppies, they might show up on your furniture, so there could potentially be some cost involved, not just a daily care, but potential damage that they can do. They destroy toys. And plan ahead. That's one of the most important things, I think, when you think about bringing a life into your life. Who takes care of them when you want to go on vacation? Because not every place allows pet. What if you are sick? What if you're in hospital with the COVID-19? We had some situations at the shelter where people ended up in hospital and families were out of town and they couldn't travel, So something to think about. What if you're away? And at the shelter here, it's a county shelter, so we do have animal control. And our officers sometimes go to a scene where the owner passed away and the family's away, or, so they're not in town. And we'd have to take in the dog, or that the family is in town, but they're not in the position to be able to take the animal. So we end up with that animal. So it's really good to have a plan. What happens, if something happened to you? And what if your dog is afraid of strangers? Who's going to take care of them? Something to think about. And the cats, they're pretty self-sufficient. So if you're just going to be gone for a few days, it may be more stressful if they went to a boarding place. Maybe you just need a feeding equipment. You can time it and dispense food at a certain time. And that might be a better option than taking them to a different place. And finally, just a few more considerations. If you are not sure, just jumping in, getting an animal, maybe talk to somebody who has a dog or cat, visit with family's pet or a friend's pet, and talk to someone who volunteers at the rescue or shelter, or become a foster for the shelter and during the kitten season, you can foster kittens. So really something interesting for you to explore. So, and of course, as somebody at the shelter, I'd always advocate for volunteering at the shelter, and it's a good option for anyone to, experience some animal time. And this is my two dogs. It's sort of a
I was going to ask what your favorite pet is, but I think that answers it right there.
I like cats too. I have a cat too. I just didn't put a picture there, but
Okay. So it's interesting because you started out talking about the science behind pet ownership, and do pets actually make people happier or not? And the science says it's the same whether you have a pet or you don't have a pet. But I think the anecdotal stories are what really prove that pets can make you happy. So can you speak more to just some of the best stories that you've heard, those anecdotal stories of pet ownership and how they've really helped somebody just with social isolation or improved mental well-being, whatever it might be?
I think one of the hardest thing, of having a pet is losing one. It's just devastating. But then what helps you through that is having a pet, and that what gets you through it. And when those difficult times, people I think I talked to that had a hard time just getting out of bed, I think they got out of bed because they had to take care of their pet. And that might be the first step. But then there's just nothing that replaces that joy of having a dog or having a cat treat you like you are the center of the universe. And I think, that when the mother takes care of their baby, there's a certain hormones that gets released. We know that same thing happens when we interact with cats and dogs or your pet. So there's definitely something, not just on the surface, but physiological level that they change us, and I I see that in the eyes of so many people who adopted dogs, cats, and they send us pictures like their life is just perfect. This is the missing piece. So I have stories after stories about, things like that, or a veteran with PTSD. They adopted a dog and now they can go outside, they can just have life again. It's just amazing what they can do.
And for the viewers, I'm sure that they all have their stories. Anybody that has owned a pet has those stories of just how they make us feel, how just great they are for just that companionship and just that well-being. So you talked, in just one final question, you talked on the risks involved, the costs involved. Would you say that the benefits far outweigh those risks and those costs?
Personally and professionally, I would have to say yes. And you can minimize that risk too. But really, I think, and this is why I think science is a bit behind on it, because some things are just difficult to measure. And some things I don't know you can measure. How do you measure the difference that your dog or cat made in your life? So it's difficult to measure some things, but definitely I think the value they bring to our life is just irreplaceable.
Well, thank you, Namika. We appreciate you coming on today and speaking to our viewers for Learn a Latte. If people have a question, they can reach out to you. Your information is on the sticker on the bottom. And I just want to conclude by saying that AARP, we've switched to this virtual world through the end of the year. So all of our events will be done virtually. We have a great lineup of presenters and fun activities, trivia, movie nights. So I just really encourage you to come back to AARP on Facebook and find out about all of the things that we have coming up that we're offering. You can also check us out on aarp.org/MI, and you can stay connected with everything that we have going on here in Michigan. So thank you, Namiko, and thank you to those of you who tuned in today.